Hey everyone, Forbidden here, bringing you another audio commentary. This is Blue-Eye Tempo against Blue, Green, Red, Dreadstill. And this is a pretty interesting match, so I'm just gonna bring you the first game. In the second game, there's a bit of a problem with Magic Workstation, and there's a disconnection, like on turn 1 or 2. So I'm not gonna bring you that game, but that's okay. This game is really interesting. And so I really hope you enjoy it. So I open 0 land for my 7, which is pretty unfortunate. But then my 6 is reasonably strong. So I mean I've got offensive and defensive options, but I'm really hoping to draw into more land. Um, so I open a Tundra, and then he's got Volcanic Island and Wasteland. So immediately I'm thinking that he's either, Dreadstill, which he is, or Um, Canadian Threshold is a possibility, and I mean there's a few other decks, but mainly I'm thinking he's gonna be a blue green red deck, um, with Tarmogoyfs and Stifle. So I don't crack the Flooded Strand immediately. I'm trying to save it as much as possible. But keep in mind, it's still better to play the Flooded Strand than a Plains, because the Flooded Strand at least gives me the option to try for a Spell Pierce. Okay, so at end step, I'm cracking the fetch land. I mean, Stifle was a possibility. I have the Force of Will for it. But the important thing was I really didn't want to draw into the junk that I put back. So I'm going to try to crack the fetch land as soon as possible. What I'm really looking for here is more land. So I've got a Fathom Seer in my hand, but it's stranded until I can get another blue source. Incidentally, by playing the Mishra's Factory, my opponent revealed that he's playing either Dreadstill or, I guess, blue, green, red, Landstill. But usually Landstill only has a couple of a couple of Wastelands, not the full package. So I'm putting him on Dreadstill right now, which means, I mean, either way he's mono-screwed. So I'm going to try to work on keeping him mono-screwed. I brainstorm, but he dazes. I mean, that doesn't matter. Which gives me free time to cast the Sarah Avenger, unless he has another daze. Instead, he's got a Force of Will. So, right now, I'm really up on cards. I mean, I guess it's about even, but the fact that my opponent had a Force of Will something, that's always good, especially when it's just like a 2-drop. I think my opponent at this point is dealing with the Mono Screw. So, I mean, um, this is the second land drop that he's missed. And so when I top deck the Wasteland, I think I could resolve the Fathom Seer, but it doesn't do me any good, to flip it. Um, and then the Wasteland I can use immediately to affect my opponent. Incidentally, I decided to beat down with the Mother of Runes when it becomes apparent that Swords to Plowshares on my Mother of Runes doesn't affect me at all, or a Lightning Bolt, or any other kind of removal, because he's already committed to the Engineered Explosives at 1, so the Mother of Runes is essentially just candy right now. As soon as the Mother of Runes starts using its ability or becoming dangerous to him, he could just sack the Engineered Explosives. So again, I mean, I've spent a lot of turns not drawing land. What I'm really looking for right now is a land to activate the Fathom Seer. So right now we're essentially both in top deck mode, um, but the Fathom Seer would allow me to draw a stack of cards. But I'm not being rewarded by the magic gods with another island. So goes 3-4 at this time. because of, I believe, oh yeah, he countered my Sarah Avenger. So it's got land, instant, and creature. But keep in mind, it's staying pretty small. Um, what I think he should have sacrificed the engineered explosives and then swung me for 4 with the Tarmogoyf. So I think he's playing more conservatively. He thinks I'm some kind of, crappy white weenie build. Um, he's got the, Stifle Not Spell Pierce. I mean, that situation is obviously insanely good for me. It does make his Goyf 4/5, but his Goyf would become 4/5 when the E hits the ground anyway. Anyway, my point about the engineered explosives was I think he thinks that I rely more on one casting cost cards than I actually do. The only thing the EE is doing is preventing me from casting the other Mother of Runes. Um, but since he doesn't know that, I think he'd be better off sacking the E and trying to take the offensive role. Because eventually I'm going to top deck into more land, and then I'm going to be better with more land than he is. There are other things I could top deck, like Sarah Avenger and such, that would force him to do something. So Trinket Mage, but I've got a stack of Dazes. I'm not drawing land anyway, so I don't really care that I'm going to miss more land drops. So Goyf moved to 4/5 on his own Dreadnought. But that's okay. I'm going to be able to, I'll be able to shrink it back down to 3/4. Which allows me to swing. And I still didn't draw another land. Which is kind of a bummer. Since I've not drawn a land, he's drawn like 3. Okay, so here I'm calculating. So he casts a Standstill, and I'm thinking about Force of Willing it. And it turns out that I have to Force of Will it. So there are not going to be enough cards in the graveyard for me to win with the stuff on board right now. And so if I don't Force of Will it, I'm going to let him draw 3 cards. I mean, I could do that, but I assume that he's going to come up with at least 1 Force of Will target off of his 3 draws from the Standstill. And so it makes more sense to Force of Will it immediately. So after I figure out that indeed my opponent has inevitability for this board situation, and that I will have to cast another spell, I then have to calculate whether or not I should Force of Will it or simply let him draw and then Force of Will his draws later. And then I decide to Force of Will it immediately. I think that's the correct decision. So Goyf goes back to 4/5 on the enchantment, but I'm able to put it back under with the Jotun Grunt. So Grunt's doing a really great job. There are a lot of cards in the graveyard, and Jotun Grunt's doing a fantastic job at keeping his Goyf small. So with the Force of Will play, I decided to pitch a Daze, which was good because I ended up drawing a Daze anyway. But I'm still hoping to top deck some kind of island, play out the Fathom Seer, and then blow past my opponent. So if I draw any island, island, tundra, or fetch land, the Fathom Seer becomes an incredibly powerful play because it's gonna net me 3 cards essentially. So just keep watching the life totals. I've been continually beating down with the Jotun Grunt, and so my opponent's starting to really feel the life pressure. And I'm almost out of time in this video, so part 2 in a second.